What is an independent contractor? Hi folks, I am Professor Always Comply Right III. I have been hired by Elevance to describe the requirement to become a properly classified independent contractor in the United States. It is true that some laws which govern independent contractor compliance have specific requirements, so I will stick to explaining the general rules. Please understand that an independent contractor is not easy to define. Even lawyers, governmental agencies and judges have a hard time with it. Let's get started. Independent contractors are supposed to operate independently. The working relationship between an independent contractor and the hiring party is supposed to be much different than that of an employee and employer relationship. If you are an independent contractor, you are supposed to provide your own software, hardware, equipment, materials, and tools that are needed to perform the job. In other words, an independent contractor invests in its own business. On the other hand, an employee receives tools, equipment, software, hardware, and materials from its employer. An independent contractor is supposed to be responsible for paying its own taxes. For example, income tax on profit or a self-employment tax. An employee, on the other hand, has taxes involuntarily withheld from its pay, like taxes that are used to fund or pay into the Social Security system. In addition to those taxes, the employer also has to pay its own employment taxes simply for employing that same employee. An employee can be employed for 1, 5, 10, or 20 years or longer by one employer. On the other hand, an independent contractor should only be hired by a hiring party for a limited period of time. You see, the longer an independent contractor works for one hiring party, the more likely a court will believe that contractor is actually an employee. In general, the name of the game for a true independent contractor is the acquisition of customers. To this end, an independent contractor ought to advertise or promote its business on a regular basis. Think about it, if you are a legitimate, independent business, aren't you in business to earn a living, expand and get more business? Speaking of which, if an independent contractor fails to bring in business, then it is much more likely that the contractor will go out of business and take losses. An employee, on the other hand, doesn't go out of business and take losses, although they are subject to be fired by their employer. An independent contractor should control the sequence or step-by-step process in which it works. However, an employee would be subject to control by a manager. So, if a manager wants an employee to work in a certain order, then the employee is obliged to work in that order. Ideally, an independent contractor should perform work and be paid on a deliverables basis, not on an hourly basis. An independent contractor ought to have a home office, at a minimum. Again, courts, judges, and regulators perceive independent contractors as a business, and what business does not have at least one office to operate out of? An independent contractor should not be doing the same type of work as employees, except in limited or special circumstances. In reality, an independent contractor ought to be an expert in what they do. Independent contractors typically are experienced professionals that can charge a premium and be left alone to perform and deliver their final work product. Speaking of which, an independent contractor should not be trained by the hiring party on how to do the job. On the other hand, an employer can train an employee as much as they want. In general, an independent contractor ought to direct and control how, when, and where they work. On the other hand, an employee is subject to direction and control from its employer regarding the how, when, and where on a day-to-day basis. In fact, an employee usually works for one employer at a time. However, an independent contractor should not be limited to one job at a time. In general, an employer dictates working hours, the types of employee benefits offered, how to perform work, and other terms and conditions of employment. This should not be the case for an independent contractor, who is supposed to be independent. And just in case you did not figure this one out yet, independent contractors should receive no or minimal supervision while performing services. Okay, that is a lot, I know. But hopefully helpful. All of this information is important because getting the classification between an employee and an independent contractor correct is important. If you get it wrong, it can hurt. Penalties for noncompliance, back pay, attorney's fees, negative reputational damages, providing benefits you did not expect to provide, and other negative consequences may arise. Independent contractor compliance is important. I recommend you get assistance with the classification process. If you are so inclined, I recommend you speak to Elevance about it. I have personally seen their compliance process. They know what they are doing. You will thank me for it. And so, this is your favorite compliance professor signing off. Be well, my friends.